I've seen you as well. There you go. Hiya, Nigel.
Hi,
I
hello.
was saying to him, it sounds a bit weird, but I was asking him how his bum was before we went live. And that's because he's just finished a silly bike ride a long way and buying expensive beers and camping in strange places and everything else. So
Yeah.
how are you doing, mate? You okay?
Yeah, I'm okay, Mark. Yourself?
Yeah, I'm getting fatter and older and grayer and all those things there,
I
you
know,
know, but
I
that's
know about
just,
the older. I know about the older and grey a bit, but
oh yeah, I've just now accepted that I'm an old fat guy, and that's basically it, kind of thing with it. And if I've got 19 years left, it's a bonus. Anyway, enough about me and my age and dropping dead in 19 years' time. How's life in the landscape? Have you been a busy boy?
well, yeah, in a way, yeah. I've been quite busy. Combination of, I mean, in summer, to be honest with you, I tend to do other things rather than photography. Summer is not my busy time. I don't run workshops in the summer. Days are too long, too many people around, lights rubbish, can't get accommodation anywhere, rubbish time to run workshops. So I don't run workshops. Lights rubbish, so I don't, and days are too long again, so I don't tend to go out with my camera because I can go out with better times of the year. Hence, I go out on my bike, do walking, and do more leisurely things.
And that's why you're a fitter man than I am.
Yeah.
Before we kind of go into the first image, which I believe I've kind of moved it in the presentation because you just let me know that it's going to be the front cover of the new book, but we'll get there in a minute.
Yeah.
I've got to ask though, did you get the Northern Lights, which happened across most of Britain a week or so ago? Did you manage to get some?
It's one of the images here.
Oh, excellent. Oh, I look forward to seeing that then. Okay.
Yeah.
I didn't know that. See, we're all prepared.
Yeah.
Okay, let's get going anyway, shall we? So the first image, I'm sorry I rearranged it for you, but you did tell me just before we went live that this is going to be the new cover.
It is. And the reason why I'd have included the whole front cover of the book, actually, including the title. And the reason why I've not included the title is that the final draft is actually done. All the book is done, apart from the title. We are, shall we say, having a full and frank discussion over the naming of the book at the moment.
Is that called procrastination?
Where it could be. The problem is there's only a certain number of titles which kind of stand out that you could possibly use. Because of the nature of such things, a lot of them have been used already, and you can't use a title which has already been used. So a couple of my favorites, for example, Impressions of Wales, for example, can't use that because it's already been used. Wales, A Photographic Journey, I wanted to use, can't use that, it's already been used. So kind of, and my publisher started off, we wanted to do Landscapes of Wales. Well, to be honest with you, it's a kind of, it is what it is on the, it says on the tin type of title, which didn't do a lot for me. So we're still in discussion.
What about Wales? Not as grey as you might think it is.
Anyway, so this is the, I think the reason why I chose this book, I like it because it's simple and it's my kind of picture. It's strong, it's a simple composition, but also it's definitively Wales. It's distinctly Wales. The slate mines in Snowdonia, it's actually taken on in Llanberis. On the opposite side of the road, it's a very, very long telephoto shot with a 600mm lens, which is quite unusual landscape terms to need a lens that long. But that is a, and let you in on something as well. I do not have a lens that long. So what I did, I've had this shot for a couple of years, but I shot it with a 200, which is the one I had at the time. When I ran a workshop last November, and I knew this shot would happen again because it's an autumn shot and autumn colors, I borrowed one of my workshop participants' 600mm lens to shoot it again to get a higher resolution version.
It's beautiful. Honestly, I absolutely love this image. And, you know, I think in America, and I'm going to say this because when I visited America, I've been out there loads of times because of family and friends in the world of photography as well. But there seems to be more of a kudos in collecting landscape photography and street photography than there is in the UK. I'm on the general high street. I mean, you could go to a market and basically in every Sunday market that I ever visited in the US, I'm talking lots of them, there would always be a photographer or photographers exhibiting work.
And the majority of the market in photography in this country is very much scenics. It's very much a decently taken picture of somewhere that somebody can relate to, have been to, met somebody at, or something like that, rather than photography for photography's sake.
Yeah. And I wish every time I walked around a market in the likes of, New York or Boston or the likes of Portland or San Francisco or whatever it is, you've just explained it. There's art for art's sake. So they're basically not just a pretty picture. They are beautiful landscape images or beautiful urban images and everything. I rate this image in that kind of level. This is an image that I would stop and go, I need to look at it more. And then you need to go, now do I want to buy it? That's that question, isn't it, really? And I absolutely love it, Nigel. And I didn't know this was going to be the front cover of the book, but I wish you all the success.
I tried different types. This is a crop. It was taken on a 3:2 proportion. Aspect ratio originally. I've tried different crops of this image, but the one I decided on was putting the orange tree, the most obvious single orange tree, right in the middle, because the eye is drawn straight to something right in the middle of the frame, and therefore it's got most impact. Therefore, compositionally, it's the strongest part of the frame. So that's why I decided to put it there.
Yeah. Anyway, love it. Well done with that. So when you say about a 600mm lens, do you think there's many landscape photographers who travel with a big lens?
No, it's hard work traveling, walking around with if you're going to do your photography, jumping in and out of the car, fine. But, to get most of the locations, which I'm going to show you now, and most locations which I like to get to or explore to, not rather get to, would be, it would just be prohibitively heavy. So I tend to go out with nothing more than 200, to be honest with you, and I rarely need it for my kind of photography. I tend to go with a lot with telephotos, a lot with wide angles, some in between, but rarely more than 200. So no, I mean, it's very much the preserve of sports and wildlife photographers, really, in truth. That kind of focal length.
Nigel, I've been a bit ignorant, really, because I usually chat with the guest and basically talk about them. But because we've done so many, I've kind of jumped over that. I do apologise.
Right. Not a problem.
Look, for those who haven't actually come across you before and your photography before, summarise who the hell you are,
okay.
what the hell you do,
taking a step back for
basically how long you've been doing photographs for and all that. I know they can watch it on Academy anyway, but give them a couple of minutes.
Well, photography, as with a lot of photographers, photography is my fourth or fifth career. Been doing it since about 2000. Well, I did some freelance work in the 1980s and 90s actually, but then dropped it for about 20 years. I've been doing it as a full-time professional for about 15 years now. Started off by selling my pictures. I'm based in the Brecon Beacons, by the way. So lovely part of the country. And started off by selling my pictures, doing some commission work. I worked for people like the Welsh Government. Probably my most well-known commission was the NATO summit in 2014, which I did for the UK government. And I've been running workshops since 2010. So I started running workshops pretty soon after I did photography as my fourth or fifth career. Yeah, been doing it ever since. So as I said, based just outside Brecon, run workshops pretty much throughout the year, but as I mentioned, apart from summer. Summer's my kind of break time when I don't do it. Yes, the book. Got a book coming out it was going to be September this year, but for one reason or another, it's been put back to March the 1st next year. So early March, early next year, I've got a book coming out, which is about landscapes of Wales, as I hinted in my earlier comments about the title. So it's very much about my take on the Welsh landscape, both in terms of familiar landscapes, the kind of thing we're going to cover this evening, hidden landscapes, those perhaps less easy to define, less easy to find, which are more about observation and exploration. So I've got a few of those as well.
Brilliant. I know we talked just before we went live about the sycamore tree, and I know it's nothing to do with tonight and things really, but I think we should do a session where we're talking about images that can never be done again or are likely never to be done. And that you stimulated that by showing me an image which we're going to see later on and things really. But
and I've got a number of those. Which
we've got to put that in the diary. Anyway, love this image. Move on to the next one. Do you have a title for this, by the way, this image?
Oh, I just call it the orange tree.
Okay, very cool.
I'm not very good at titling my images. I'm not one for these. You know, a lot of photographers will give titles, whether some dubious, some legitimate, some a little bit dodgy titles to their pictures. I like to let my pictures speak for themselves, I think, by and large.
Very good. Sheep.
Okay. The line of sheep. As you can tell, I go for the very obvious titles. Okay, so this what caught my eye. This was just on a hillside, in not too far away from my my place in the Brecon Beacons, actually, and it's one of those which relies entirely on observation. It was a very dull day. A day where you wouldn't, a dull grey day, I think probably in March, I think it was March, where you wouldn't normally necessarily go out with your camera. But it's one of those where I happened to observe a line of sheep, or half of them looking in one direction. Clearly something caught their eye, and caught it with a 200mm lens. So it's quite a long telephoto shot as well. So I just like the shape that the sheep make, and the fact that a number of them are all looking in one direction.
What's your kind of take on black and white landscape photography and things, really?
Well, this is very much, if you saw this image in color, it doesn't have the same impact, because part of the impact of this picture is the contrast between the white of the sheep, or slightly off white of the sheep, and the darkness of the backdrop, the background, a grass. In color, the grass is a real mix of different shades of green, yellow, which means you don't achieve the same level of contrast as you do in black and white. There are a number of different characteristics that generally work well in black and white in photography as opposed to color, which are contrast, tone, shape and form, texture, and pattern. And they tend to generally tend to work well in black and white. I think a good question to ask yourself, if you're shooting, you occasionally see people on Facebook saying, which do you prefer, the black and white or the color picture? And I think the question to ask yourself is that, is color a key ingredient, or are one of those other photographic elements a more obvious or striking, clear ingredient to the impact of the picture than the color? And if color is not a key ingredient, or in fact a detractor, then look at it in terms of black and white.
Good. Questions are all flooding through, in fact. What inspired you to pursue landscape photography as, the topic, as it were?
Yeah, I've always been, even before I took up photography, I've always been a keen outdoor person. Done a lot of walking, done a lot of climbing, done a lot of biking, done a lot of stuff like that, and I'm an environmentalist. I like the environment, so I kind of so it's those actually came before photography, and I think that is true for any photographer, really. For example, a wildlife photographer is nearly always a wildlife enthusiast first and foremost, and a photographer second. And I think the same is true for me. I'm not. It sounds slightly perverse in saying that, but I'm actually not particularly interested in photography for photography's sake. The equipment stuff, yes, I know a lot about it because I have to teach it, but it bores me rigid talking about somebody's lenses, their cameras. When somebody walks up to me at something like the photography show and said, "Are you a Nikon or a Canon man?" I just want to cringe. So I'm more about the visual, the connection with the environment and the visual impact of the imagery than I am about the equipment side and the technical side.
Brilliant. When you're sorry, I've got questions here, so I've got to go through them now. They're coming in. Black and white. Do you have a preferred technique in post-production for black and white?
Yeah, I used to use Silver FX. I must admit now I just because it's become so easy in Lightroom to do it in Lightroom, and it's just simpler. I just look at the color channels and decide what level of lightening or darkening I want to give each individual color channel. That's the way I tend to do it.
Yeah, brilliant. How do you plan your photography trips and shoots? So I don't think they mean the workshop. I think they're talking
Right.
about as far as your own particular one. Do you have anything specific? Do you go out looking for the idea of the day or something, or what do you do?
Go out on a day which looks promising, and go out with a camera, look around and see what happens. I'm not one to go to obvious locations because you generally tend to replicate a composition which has been done several times before. For that reason, I'm determined never to ever take a picture of the Porthcawl Lighthouse. But there are a few locations like that which I will inevitably, if you're running workshops, you do tend at times to go to the known locations. But if I'm interested in my own photography, I will explore. I'll go to somewhere perhaps I've not been before, go out with the camera, perhaps in promising conditions. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But for example, if you've got a day where you've got perhaps a elevated location on a hill in a forecast which is perhaps sunshine and showers, where you've got clear views always round, and you can get different views of the landscape, generally you'll come back with something. So it's very much choosing the right kind of weather. And I don't like planning too much, because you find if you plan too much and you end up with making a beeline for a location, it becomes rather formulaic and predictable. And you tend to get unique images by simply going out and exploring. It doesn't matter where it is.
And if the lighting's not as good as you want, you're disappointed all day then, isn't it? Because
this one, for example, this one is one of my favorite shots, but the light was flat and grey as anything.
Yeah,
there's nothing in the light at all. Now, but obviously you're not going to go out every day and get a line of sheep which happen to be conveniently in a line like that. Therefore, that won't happen every time. Therefore, I must admit, I'd be lying if I didn't say I would prioritize going out in days that look promising, whether it's foggy or misty conditions you get above the mist and you're looking down on it, or whether it's changing light with sunshine and showers using backlighting and that kind of thing. Okay. So I certainly, by choice, would I go out on a hazy sunny day? No, probably not.
Okay. I'm not sure if we're ahead of the game on this question. Can you describe your favorite location for landscape photography and why it stands out for you? Is there something in today that you would say, or is there?
Whoa, no, I do. I've got one of my favorite spots is I've got a couple of pictures of it right at the end of this, actually, if we get there. It's the Innispandy slate mill in Snowdonia.
Okay.
And that is one of my favorites, and I'll talk you through it hopefully. So
when we get there.
I do but as I mentioned, I'm not one for identifying particular locations. I'm more one for just seeing what happens.
Next image.
Right, this is also very close to home as well. Have you noticed, a bit like the first shot, it's got a tree in the middle.
It has.
So I tend to go for trees in the middle when they're in the picture. This is a very, very frosty morning, a very frosty December, and a few years ago, this one. Turned to black and white, which makes it a very high contrast between the dark backdrop and the frost-covered trees. That is frost, not snow. It was a very, very heavy frost. Just makes quite a stark, cool, landscape picture, really. So one of those which again is based on observation. I quite like that the tree stood on the hillside. I was actually on my bike with my camera. I was on my bike when I took this picture.
At first glance, it looks infrared.
No, it's not.
No, but at first glance, I would have said, a nice infrared image kind of thing.
Yeah, no, it's simply a black and white conversion of a very frosty landscape.
Very good.
And it's just down the road from me. It's one of those where in ordinary lighting or ordinary conditions, you probably wouldn't give it a second glance because it wouldn't stand out. So it's just a reminder that a lot of our images which have got impact, they really are dependent on light and weather. They're not necessarily the location itself, it's the situational circumstances that you're there in.
How do you choose the right time of day or weather conditions for your shots?
I think I've largely covered that in the last question, actually.
Yeah.
And actually, that obviously depends on the time of year. Generally, in the winter months, you can really shoot all day round. In the summer, by and large, you're not really going to want the sun right above you. If the sun's out at all, which is very flat, you'll generally look for lower light. The one observation I would make here, that too many landscape photographers get hung up on the golden hour, far too many, when actually a lot of the most interesting lighting conditions, particularly in mountain landscapes, and the sun needs elevation to send light, drop light down into the landscape, would be several hours after the sun rises and before it sets. And particularly in black and white, of course, then you're more dependent on texture, pattern, contrast, and shape, those kind of elements. Then things like the golden hour is not as relevant. Far too many landscape photographers get hung up on that sunrise, sunset element aspect of photography.
Composition. There's a few questions come through in composition, in fact. Any advice on composition, specifically for landscape photography? I'm getting a little bit confused is the question.
I've got a couple of presentations on composition, which I've probably need to do another one with you. I've done a couple on the Academy, yeah, but I constantly update them though. I think there are a number of rules which we've all heard of, things like using foreground, rule of thirds, lead-in lines, these kind of things, but they are a guide and they don't always work. And the key thing is to remember with them is it's not what they do, it's not what they are, it's what they do. So for example, the rule of thirds creates context for an image. So if you've got a single clear main subject, it creates context for it. Now sometimes, as you've seen from my pictures here, I use the middle of the frame. I'll put my main subject right in the middle of the frame because in the middle it's got most impact and it's a balanced symmetrical composition. Whereas the rule of thirds will create context and space. If I want to emphasize that feeling of context and space, I won't necessarily put my main subject on the thirds. I'll put it closer to the edge of the frame because it maximizes the impact of that context and space. So that's a way you can use the theory for an example of the way you can use a theory for one of the rules, but adapt it to get the impact and the effect that you actually want. And they've all got a reason for being used. The lead-in lines, most of my lead-in lines are not lead-in lines to a subject. They are actually something that takes your eye through the picture, creating a visual journey, but they might not lead to anything, but the line itself will be a strong element of the picture. So these things have got a reason for being used, but don't follow them religiously.
Brilliant. So this next image, can you talk us through this one in the hidden landscape, as it were?
Yeah, it is. It's Cleghorn Moor. Again, the Brecon Beacons. All these pictures are in my book, by the way. So this is fairly local to me, and it's one of those where man's intervention on the landscape all too often ignored. Pylons. Why would you want to take a picture of pylons? But they're such a distinctive feature, particularly with the mist rising from the grass. And this is kind of this misty effect comes and goes extremely quickly. Tends to come and go in the morning. So I was up on Cleghorn Moor and just caught this one. I was actually looking in a completely direction, but I like the placing of the pylons and that's the balance and the atmosphere they created. And it's one of those things where it's easy to pass this kind of opportunity by because you'll want to get to somewhere that's an obvious photographic opportunity, but you can make a photographic opportunity out of anything.
There's a question about river mist. I'm keen to capture river mist. Love the winter mist. I'm summarizing because it's so long. Any tips basically on choosing the right morning to go out to capture mist around by the riverbanks?
Oh gosh. Well, mist occurs because of evaporation, because of you get warm air condensing, cooling down at night, evaporate, and it condenses on water, which creates mist. It can happen generally with a temperature drop at night. It will typically happen. And you'll often see in the weather forecasts potential mist or foggy conditions. There is a difference. Mist tends to drift and it tends to lie on water. Fog can simply be a bank of fog you can't see through. But with fog, you can often get above the fog if you get to an elevated viewpoint, and you'll just see a sea of what looks like cloud beneath you. So there is a difference between the two. But it is a question of, you'll often see an indication in the forecast. Typically still, you won't find it in windy conditions. You won't find it in low pressure conditions. You'll find it in high pressure still conditions, where you've got a temperature drop during the night typically.
Is there a certain time of year that it's more successful for you? If somebody was looking to shoot it, I mean.
Yeah, you can get misty all year round. I mean, I would say probably June, July, August, less so, because you don't have the nights being as cool as typically as you would at other times of year. But you can certainly get, apart from that, you can get it in any time of year, really.
Saying that, it's freezing here today. I've had to put a jumper on.
Yeah, well, it's been a cool spell of weather, isn't it?
Yeah, it has, kind of thing with it.
Yeah.
I've got loads of questions, honestly. I do apologise. How do you handle challenging conditions such as very harsh weather or difficult terrain?
Yeah, that's a really hard one to answer. I'm quite used to difficult terrain. I'm quite used to being in harsh conditions, and you make a judgment. If it doesn't look as though it's going to improve, do you sit it out, or do you think, no, I'll leave it? Knowing if you leave it, then there's a chance the weather might suddenly break and you've missed a great opportunity, because some of the best opportunities can be the moment the weather breaks. Yeah. And you don't know quite when that's going to be. So there's an element of, I mean, clearly with harsh, you wrap up warm, wrap up against wet weather, make sure you've got the right equipment. Don't get yourself freezing cold on a mountainside. It's not a good idea. Often take an umbrella with me. Stick an umbrella. You never know. It comes in useful. Protect yourself. You just have to take sensible precautions. But it is the uncertainty is an annoying thing. If you know the weather's going to improve, you stick it out. If you know it's not going to, you think, great, I can give up and go home. It's the uncertain weather that you think, oh, is it going to change? Is it going to get any better? That's the one you have to make a judgment on. Do you want to stick it out, or do you just want to cut and run?
So we talk about this image a minute, but there's a question about tripods or sandbags.
Okay.
Bean bags, sorry, not sandbags. Anyway,
right.
Let's go.
This is a Motte Bailey at Trecastle. It's actually a scheduled ancient monument. But I just love the way that the trees grew on the landform created by the monument. It's backlit. Generally, most of my woodland trees are backlit. Woodland's really hard to deal with unless you use backlighting, which means you can make a feature of the shadows and you can use the light and shadow effect to your advantage. Otherwise, you cannot end up with a bit of a mess. And here the trees made a very clear form on the hill itself, and I chose a location where the trees didn't obscure the land around me, apart from on the mound itself. So it made quite a distinctive feature. One of those where it is very much based on form and texture and contrast. So it's a classic black and white image. In this time of year, it was taken in February. Then there aren't any leaves on the trees. When actually that works quite well, because the trees have got quite a stark form, and the stark form works quite well with that kind of image.
Advice on tripod or something else to support the camera?
Well, if I've got a rule I set for myself, if you can get the aperture and shutter speed combination you want handheld, handhold every time. It's quicker, particularly in changing light, far quicker to adapt to changing conditions, or changing location, changing position, or getting the camera to a point you want. You can work far more effectively and quickly handheld than if you use a tripod, generally because it's more static and you're in a fixed position, you're more likely to miss a shot. So I will always handhold where I can. Clearly, if in lower light, or I want to do a long exposure shot, then clearly, yes, I'll use a tripod. But near the majority of the images I'm showing here, and I would say probably about 80% of the images, my images in total, on the whole, are handheld.
Okay.
I don't use them on a monopole because I don't see the point. To me, either an image, the light's high enough for the image to be handheld, or it's not, in which case I'll use a tripod and do the job properly.
Brilliant. Our next image.
This is the Hobbyists shipwreck in Rossili, and a number of you here listening will probably know this spot. Yeah, it's I did, after this shot, I took this shot, decide that I would never take another picture on a sandstorm because it did cost me several £100 worth of repairs to my kit, and found one of my lenses. It's sort of when I rotated the zoom. The focusing barrel, then it made a crunching sound, unfortunately. But it was quite effective, and the texture of the sand works quite well. Now there's not quite as much of the shipwreck. This is the hull. This is the top of the hull, because the sand level is now a bit higher than when I took this. The landscape was stripped a few years ago, and it's taken a few years for the sand level to come back up again. So when you go there now, you don't generally see as much, and obviously the tide has to be out as well. This was taken, it looks like a long exposure shot. It's actually not. It was taken at a 60th of a second, but the wind was so strong that it's almost created a long exposure effect.
There's a question on disasters. Have you had any real disasters when shooting landscapes? Besides
right.
for the sand, I mean.
Probably the big, this is not the biggest. The biggest disaster I probably had was, well, I've had two that I can think of. One of which was led to personal injury, but the first one was I was running a workshop at Bracelet Bay in Swansea, overlooking Mumbles Lighthouse. Again, number of your viewers will know it. And I was out teaching. I put my camera bag on a rock, and I made a fatal error forgetting the tide comes in. So while I was out there teaching for about half an hour, what was well clear of the water, and my camera bag was full of 2 bodies, 4 lenses, whole bag full of kit. Next thing I knew, in fact, I hadn't even noticed it. One of my clients shouted out in the water and thought it was a dead body in the water, and pointed at what looked like was dead body. And of course, it wasn't. It was my camera bag. So basically, my entire set of kit went for a swim. It was probably the biggest single insurance claim that my insurance company have had for a while. So that was probably equipment. I've had a few incidents, but that was probably my biggest single one.
I almost lost a car. I almost lost a car.
Did you? What did you do?
Yeah. Well, I was photographing for Welsh Water at the time on all the blue flag beaches, and shooting the landscape of Wales. And you know, I am not a landscape. We've talked about this in the past, right? And I'm not a landscape photographer. Anyway, I had a written note to say I could actually drive on any beach in Wales.
Oh,
all right.
Okay.
Yeah, a written note that I could actually carry. Anyway, so drove on to this beach, parked up. I basically bought a tripod for the 3 years because I knew it was going to rust to hell and basically have to be thrown away in 3 years' time with this project and so on.
Yeah.
I know we chatted a little bit about it. Anyway, shooting, blah, blah, blah. And I looked around and the car was already up to beyond door level. All right.
Oh, no.
At this point, I looked down the beach and there's the warden flying up the beach in his car. And I'm thinking, ignore the warden. Let's just get off, just get out. Because it's only up to my knees, but where I parked the car actually was in a hollow. Okay. Anyway.
Right.
So I got back to the car, had to get in through the back of the kind of the hatch, as it were, in the Land Rover. So
Yeah.
I got in through the back, crawled through, and I'm not a small guy, am I right? So crawled through, managed to get out. I mean, thank God for a Land Rover. But basically,
I was going to say, any other vehicle, it wouldn't have got out, would it?
Well, until I got down, and the beach warden said, "Are you okay? Did you get stuck?" I went, "No, just didn't realise the tide was going to come as fast." He said, "You wouldn't believe how many cars we lose here."
Crikey.
I can't remember the beach, and I don't want to remember the beach. But anyway, that was a long time ago. But that was my very near disaster, and so on with it. Anyway,
my second disaster. While we're on disasters, very quickly, my second one was on the GR5. I was taking pictures and walking at the same time, and I slipped down a ravine. Slipped halfway down the mountain, ended up with gashed knee. That's all I had. I could have easily killed myself, saved by a backpack on my back. But I got sepsis through an infection in my knee. Ended up in hospital for a month. So
shot,
I did actually get a decent shot. Yeah.
That's all that counts. Anyway,
rather dark. Hang on a sec. There we go.
Go. Okay.
Okay.
Oh,
right.
A landscape.
Yeah, this is a kind of shortly to become a lost landscape rather than a hidden landscape, really. And for that reason, I've included it. Port Talbot Steelworks, I'm sure you recognise it. I quite like it because I like the backlighting effect on the smoke. And it's one of those iconic locations that I'm really going to miss. I've run workshops here at Port Talbot Steelworks for a number of years. It's great as the sun goes down, great at sunset, great in all conditions because you're guaranteed something with the lights of the steelworks. But of course, from this month onwards, the main blast furnaces they're being decommissioned, and they're coming down. I think as we speak. I know the demolition work was going to start in June, so I think it's probably about now. So yeah, I mean it's probably the last example in Britain of large heavy industry left, and with the added advantage that it's incredibly photogenic. And the South Wales coast path, the footpath runs behind the motorway, so you get an elevated view overlooking it, and particularly in the winter where the sun sets directly behind it, you get some great light effects and great shots. So we'll be sorely missed, Port Talbot Steelworks. I have to say, environmentally though, of course, it's a bit of a disaster.
Good.
So perhaps time moves on.
There's a famous Max Boyce joke, but it's too long to kind of say with it and things really, about this view, about two old boys sat on a bench and they're overlooking Port Talbot with it and things really. But that's a whole different kind of thing. How do you balance? By the way,
for anyone who ever comes up here and goes along that path with your camera, beware the local farmer. He's a nightmare.
How do you balance capturing the natural beauty of a location and then basically adding an artistic kind of touch to it and things really?
Do you mean what? Are we talking about post-processing here?
I don't know. It says, how do you balance capturing the natural beauty of a location with adding your artistic touch? So right, I mean, it could be composition or...
Yeah, I think certainly composition is key. And I make my images as simple as possible. Therefore, a golden rule is to think about, ask yourself, why am I taking this picture? What is it about the scene that's in front of me that's caught my eye? And how can I make that clear to the viewer? And following on from that is, what do I include in the picture? What do I exclude from the picture? What angle do I shoot it from? What light do I want? And how am I going to process it as well? For example, I use vignetting quite a lot, which draws, if I want to emphasize the center of the frame, I might darken the edges slightly, quite subtly, just to draw the eye into the frame, into a little bit. I'll probably emphasize a feature that I want to pick out, and by maybe doing a little bit of work on a selective area of the image, that kind of thing. So that is part of the process, yes.
Okay, next image.
Right, yeah, this is our this is Langorse Lake, and this was the aurora, or it's actually a stitch of 8 shots, and that's the moon in the middle. So that's the aurora we had, what, about 6 weeks ago now, something like 4 or 5 weeks, something like that, which was an extraordinarily spectacular aurora, as we all know. And the internet and Facebook was full of images all over the country. Now, I chose this location. It's Langhorse Lake, because I knew it had a reflection, and it's easy to get to the locations where you've got a sky. A feature works well, a single feature. For example, my favorite Ernest slate mine location, which we will hopefully get to, would have been a good spot as well. But this is a few miles down the road now, I could easily get to. So if we get another aurora like this, they do seem to be becoming more and more frequent. Whether we'll get one like this again, who knows? But I knew this location. I knew that it would give me a reflection, which was more than just the aurora in the sky, but also obviously the reflection in the water as well.
There was a question about, do you usually camp out for night shots? Do you stay on location, I suppose, ready for the dawn as well?
Yeah, I have done a few times. If I'm being honest, I haven't done it very much. A few times, yes. I've a couple of my Snowdonia shots, favorite Snowdonia shots. I've plonked my tent on a tent on the top of Glitter Bower and see what happens in the morning. So yeah. A few times I've done that. I always promise to do it more than I will actually do. It's probably an age thing. Takes a sense of adventure away. The idea is there. But the reality is, oh God, that sounds like hard work.
Yeah, but there's a local pub just down the lane, so you may as well go and stay there, haven't you? You know.
So
okay, right. How was your what's the question? How do you stay motivated and inspired to keep shooting landscapes?
It helps if you've got a book to work on.
Course, yeah.
And also, I'm always looking for new locations to run workshops as well. So that gives me the opportunity to explore new places. But yeah, I mean, I absolutely, I'm with the questioner there in that one. Sometimes in your local area where you've been time and time again, and particularly around where I am at the moment, I've got so many pictures of the Brecon Beacons that I think to myself, how can I get something that's different and better than I've already got? I'm at that stage in the Isle of Skye as well. I have spent 10 years going up to Skye and back running workshops, and I have got a huge collection of pictures of Skye to the point I actually don't know what to do with them all. Generally, when I go up these days, I run my workshop, don't often get my camera out, because that unless it's something really different and really unique, then I will. But by and large, yeah. And so I think it's a question of going to somewhere new, thinking of new ideas, thinking always, can I get something better and different than what I've got before? And new locations is a key thing, I think, to keep inspiration going, definitely. And having a project, having a goal to work to.
This image?
Yeah, this is a good example of where I was looking for pictures for my book, last plug, and this is Beulah, which is a little village about 4 miles west of Builth Wells in mid Wales. And I was just I could see one of those days where it was a sunshine and showers type day. I was looking for green mid Wales images, and I wanted something that had contrast between dark sky, autumn color, bright light, and I just walked up a hill. And I had no idea what I could see from the top of this hill, but I thought, I know that if I walk up a hill, then generally spend my time looking at the changing light, I will find something or other. And I just spent the time wandering around, and I found this view, which to me sums up mid Wales, was a very strong kind of just a typical mid Wales landscape in evocative light. So it's a good example of one where if you're looking for some to get a strong chance of getting a picture, go to an area. I hadn't been to this area at all before. I didn't know this landscape at all, but I just found a path to walk up, and I looked at my map and I saw the path went up to an elevated location with an elevated viewpoint, and I just followed it and see what I could find. Could be I'd have come back with nothing, but by and large, if you do that in a landscape of this type, you will typically get in weather conditions where you've got changing light, sunshine and showers, particularly heavy showers, then generally you'll come back with something.
Cool. Next image.
Yeah, this was taken a few days before the last one, actually. And I like this one. This one also works quite well in black and white because of the folds and the landscape. But I do like the green. Again, it's backlit. A lot of my images of this type of is backlit. I like the folds of the fields and the contrast with the cloud detail in the sky as well, and just the very simple hill profile. So it makes a simple composition as well. Again, it's one where I just I was driving around. This one I wasn't on my feet. I was driving around looking for interesting locations to photograph, and I caught a glimpse of this, and I hopped over a gate into a field and just saw the light change and saw what I could find. This is a place called Dover, which is near Newtown.
Question about printing. Do you prefer to print yourself or go to a photo lab?
I always print myself.
Okay. Any tips on that? Any papers specifically that you like?
I use matte paper. I've got an Epson large format printer. I just generally find I use Epson. I have done for years, and I've got an A2 printer which prints on a roll, so I can produce big long landscapes from it. And color calibration is key. So getting the settings right is important as well. But it's that takes a while. But I must admit, I know what works with mine. I am not a printing expert by any stretch of the imagination. If I was asked to set up somebody else's printer, I actually probably wouldn't have a clue.
Okay, our next image.
This is the Severn Bridge, or second Severn crossing, or dare I call it the Prince of Wales Bridge, but I probably won't because I've never been a favourite. As for those huge signs at the end of it. Anyway, this is one where you really have to, it's actually taken from on the Wales side of the bridge, just outside Chepstow. It's, what's the little, bear with me. I haven't got the name of the, bear with me. I might be able to find it on the file info. Let's have a look. Whoops. Sudbrook, that's it. Yeah. So little village called Sudbrook. It's almost like a lost world, Sudbrook. It's got a railway line ending there as well. And you go through and you eventually get to a rocky viewpoint. But this is a mud flat. So it's one of those where you have to accept that you're going to be at risk of getting extremely muddy. So fortunately, I was able to stand right on the edge of the rock outcrop to get this picture. But the appeal to this was at dawn. It was about 7 o'clock in the morning in September, something like that. And to get the texture of the mud, I needed to get right close to it. So clambered down between the rocks, needed to wait for the tide to go out far enough. Unfortunately, that coincided with the dawn as well. So a lot of timing comes into play with this kind of shot to make sure you've both got the tide conditions. It would have been no good with the tide in, obviously, because I wouldn't have got the detail in the mud, and the colourful light as well. So yeah, but it wasn't planned. I just happened to be here when the tide was out or going out, and the sun was coming up. So I quite like that shot. I like the colours.
There's a question.
What advice you have to work quite hard to get to the location.
A question. What advice would you give to aspiring landscape photographers? I'm 18 and just learned to drive.
Right. Explore. One
Stay
word.
Safe. Stay safe.
That's another one. Stay safe is another one. Yes, I mean, probably going down on mud flats on steep rocks might not be a good start, but he's 18, crikey, it should be fine. No, yeah, just don't. On the one hand, you'd say, okay, go to a few known locations and just practice with known compositions. But my way of always doing it is just explore and see what you can come up with and not being frightened to make mistakes. Worry less about the technical side than thinking about composition and what catches your eye. And you'll pick up the technical side as you go along as well. But so many people get so hung up on the technical side, they forget the creative side.
Next image.
This is Cleghorn Slate Quarry, which is a slate quarry just above Blaenau Ffestiniog in Snowdonia. And it is Blaenau Ffestiniog is a stunning place. I have got so many pictures I love there. And this is up in the quarry itself, and it's unmatchable on a still morning. I've actually got a wider shot of this showing the mist over the hills as well. But this is one where you've got the remains of the slate workings, and perfectly reflected. And I love the autumn colours of this as well. So just one of those very hidden, we call this hidden landscapes. It's one of those very hidden away landscapes you've actually almost got to know the area to know where to find it. Otherwise, you'll never find it. And what I'll do is to often, because clearly we've all got to go to somewhere the first time, we've never been there before, is simply look at my OS map, look at a road, see does it go up? Does it go to somewhere I don't know? Just follow it and see what happens. And sometimes it can take you, generally if you go, as I mentioned before, where roads going uphill, steep uphill roads will generally end up at something. They've got a reason for being there. You don't find a road going to nothing. So this is one where it went to an abandoned slate quarry, and I found this, and it's got a wonderful lake in the middle of it.
Very nice.
Right, this is I've got a couple of this slate mill actually, so we might as well cover them both at the same time. If you want to go into the next one as well, I've got a nighttime one and a daytime one. And the great thing, if we go back to the nighttime one, this is, you can walk all the way around it, and which means that it's great for shooting any angle. It's also very good for what I like with compositions, which are very simple compositions, a single feature in an open landscape. If you remember earlier, I mentioned about using the principle of the rule of thirds, but taking it a stage further and having a main feature close to the edge of the frame, which maximizes the feeling of space and isolation. So it's ideal for very low horizon line, feature in the bottom corner, and an expansive sky. This one's also lit inside with two head torches, one for the elevation at the side, a white one, and one for the elevation at the front, the red one. And actually it's a blended image because I tried to do it in one, I couldn't do it. So in fact, the side elevation was taken on a separate shot, and the two and blended in to the other, because I tried to do it in one go and I simply couldn't handle the two head torches. It's lit by moonlight from the outside, and obviously a clear sky at night. So considering it was lit by moonlight, the stars were there's a touch of the Milky Way that you can see there. It's very faint, admittedly, but quite good night sky as well. So that's the night sky version, and the daytime one is an autumn shot. Very different view of it. See much more of the context of the surrounding landscape, and it's such a fantastic photographic feature. Great thing is as well, I've never seen another photographer there, ever. I've only ever been I've been there several times. It's one of my go-to places when I run my workshops in Snowdonia, and we've never come across another photographer there. So I don't want to give anyone ideas. I want it to remain hidden. But it's one of those places that fortunately, I usually have it to myself. If I'm with a group, we're usually alone. As you can see, you can photograph it all sorts of light, all sorts of weather, all sorts of shooting positions at night and day. So it makes it an ideal landscape subject.
Right. And we didn't think we'd get through those images tonight, did we? I've still got questions to go though. All right, so don't run away yet.
Right.
You've spent enough time in the pub and on your bike for the past week, okay? So how do you ensure your safety while shooting at night? So that's a really because we've featured some nighttime and dawn images. Is there anything specific that you do?
Powerful head torch.
Yeah.
If I'm running a group near a road, I will make sure they've got high-vis jackets on. And I have two. It doesn't apply obviously if you're not near a road or not near that kind of situation. But the main thing, generally arrive at daylight so you know where you are. It can be if you arrive somewhere at night and trying to find where to, you can't work, you can't see your way around, you can't see what's what, you can't see hidden holes and that kind of thing. So yeah, there's an element of caution. Generally, up mountains, I will only go up a mountain where I know there's a clear track back down, and I would suggest that somebody who hasn't done that before does not go up mountains in the dark. Penavan is possibly an exception where it's got such a big wide track. With a decent head torch, it's actually pretty safe to go up somewhere like Pan. I've done Penavan several times in the dark, but certainly on a more remote landscape with more difficult ground, then absolutely do it in daylight, or make sure you know it first and make sure you're used to walking in the dark. So there are some safety precautions, which are, it's all really, as with that kind of thing, it's all about using common sense, to be honest with you, and of course having the right clothing. The right clothing and the right gear with you, and as I mentioned, a powerful head torch is of course a must.
Hope you don't mind me chipping in on this, but I'm a big one about if you're shooting alone, make sure somebody else knows where you're going to be.
That's a good one.
And basically make sure that they know what time you're going to be back-ish, even within like an hour or two. Because then if you're not contacting them within that hour or two, they're going to get straight onto it. Then my next point is a big mountain rescue kind of shout out. It's that you're never just putting yourself at risk, you're putting mountain rescue at risk. So don't take any risk that you're going to then actually, somebody else who's trying to find you is going to put themselves at risk, please, with it and things. Right? I know that's common sense, but it's amazing how many people just go a little bit brain dead in search of an image and things. Right? I'm a big one for mountain rescue. Not sure if you know that, but please.
But certainly, I would also emphasize, if you don't know an area, do not go wandering off in the dark. Trying to find your location. Just don't do it.
Stay on the path. I know there's a better image over there, whatever it is, but you know, at night time and dawn and everything else, you're traveling in dark, and that's never a good thing, whether you're on coast or mountain or whatever. Somebody doesn't know you've slipped and you've got stuck down somewhere.
And on the coast, the tide come in more quickly than you might expect.
I've said tonight about my car. I never told the insurance company that, or the person who bought my Land Rover.
And don't forget, if you've got a cove in the coast, for example, and you've gone round a headland, then when the tide comes in, you might find you can't get back. Yeah,
I know that for a fact. Not through swimming. Swimming round to coast, because I'm used to be a big swimmer and things really. Okay, a couple more questions to finish off with, Nigel, if that's okay with you. Talked about the safety. Clouds. What role do clouds play in the majority of your landscape photography?
Clouds aren't there just for cloud's sake. Clouds control and manage light. So they create mixed lighting. They create contrast, because you've got an element of the landscape which might be lit. Some of it's lit, some of it's in shadow. You can manage the direction of light with cloud, particularly, for example, if you're using backlighting, like in that example of that picture there, with the sun coming from between clouds. So it's a mistake to think of clouds in the sky. A sky is boring without clouds in it. Clouds have a lot of function in terms of being able to add variety, contrast. Long exposure photography, for example, is a good example there, where you can use the cloud movement to quite positive effect as well. So clouds have got a lot of different functions, but certainly from my point of view, to that ability to control and direct light and add contrast to an image is the key aspect to clouds.
Brilliant. Guys, I've just put a link through to Nigel's website for you. So you can kind of go and...
Just a note on that one, that is my commercial website. I've actually got too many websites. It's my fault. That's my one I use for hence the emphasis on it about commissions. My training website is creativephotographytraining.co.uk.
Great. I'll put that live tomorrow. and we'll make sure it's on the Instagram, on the Facebook and Instagram anyway, kind of thing with it. One final question, if you don't mind. How has your landscape photography evolved in the past, say, 10 years?
Oh, you had to leave the most difficult question to last, didn't you?
I just put the questions through. That's all. It's not my fault.
Oh, gosh.
Has it evolved?
I do more long exposure photography than I did 10 years ago. That's for sure. And I think because I've got a greater understanding of why things happen now, partly because I've spent a lot of time putting my presentations together. I've got presentations on any aspect of landscape photography, virtually all of them, and they do make you think about why things are happening, why you made decisions. And I suppose I've got a greater understanding of things I know which work, things which don't work, because I'm able to apply them. I mentioned about the characteristics of black and white photography earlier on, where I'll have a greater understanding now and thinking in advance, what works in black and white, what doesn't work in black and white, what works with long exposure photography, what doesn't work with long exposure photography. So I suppose I've always been strong on composition. And I think composition is probably something which I feel as though it's ingrained within my work and always has been. But you certainly giving some thought in terms of what compositional styles work for me, how to design elements of the picture, I think more clearly about, partly because I've spent so much time thinking about this kind of thought process for my presentations. So that thought process, putting it all down on paper, has helped my own thought process as well, hopefully as teaching it to other people.
Nigel, once again, absolutely brilliant night, mate. I can't believe we got through so many images, but we'll get you back soon, I hope, because we haven't done anything for a while, and especially as you're off in the summer.
Indeed.
I'll drag you back again. I'd really like to do that one on the invisible landscape, as in
Not a problem.
It's gone. I think that would be a really, really good one to actually talk about as well. Yeah, really good. Did you do, and there was some questions, did you do much photography during lockdown?
No, I didn't. But just limited on the amount you can go, where you could get to, really. Obviously, the lockdown periods changed. Some was full lockdown, some was partial lockdown. Some we were able to get out and about more than others. But certainly during the full lockdown periods, no, very little.
Brilliant, Nigel, mate, you're amazing. I give you permission to have another beer.
Okay, thank you.
And I still need to buy you one. But we'll speak soon. Thanks everybody for joining us live. We'll see you in a few weeks' time. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks, Nige.
Cheers.
See you soon, mate.